A huge welcome to all our panelists, and thank you so much for joining us today. Here's a short introduction. Malvika Bhatia, our first panelist, is the archive director at the Citizens Archive of India. She is helming a project that preserves the legacy of memory. The CAI aims to record and archive the personal stories of Indians who have witnessed life in pre-independent India, as well as in the years after independence through oral interviews. Malvika's, their Facebook page has really interesting stuff. We'll put a link to it and you must check them out. They really have some fabulous interviews. Our other panelist is Vatsala Patsarthi, who's 84. Vatsala, thank you for joining us. Vatsala remembers a time when life was lived by simple Gandhian ideals. She's experienced the turmoil that the Second World War has caused in her life and in the lives of others around her. And she also remembers growing up with inspiration from the freedom fighters, reading about the freedom struggle. And she feels all these things have shaped her life and helped her play a positive role as a homemaker. Our other two panelists, as Nidhi mentioned, are Mr. P.K. Sablok and Mrs. Adarsh Sablok. They both migrated during partition. Mr. Sablok from Rawalpindi and Mrs. Sablok from Multan. And theirs was one of the first memories we shared on Silver Talkies. Every August, we share memories of people living through these years in Silver Talkies, because we feel we have a space and it's important to record that history of a very important time in our country's life. And the Sabloks was one of the first memories we recorded. So thank you so much for being here today.
In 1947,
yes,
during March 47, we were having annual examination for the 9th class. Then we were writing, then the headmaster came and he said, please stop writing and go to your homes immediately. So he didn't tell the reason. He said, don't immediately go home, because he had got the message from the deputy commissioner that students should be sent home immediately. When we went home, then in the evening, I asked my father what was the problem. Then I came to know that on that day morning, there was a radio announcement that India will be divided into two domains. One where Muslims will be majority area. So this news itself was the reason for sending us home. By evening, lot of Kabali, means these Pathans from Frontier Province, NWFP, from Afghanistan, they came to Rawalpindi and the trouble started. They started burning the houses of Hindus and Sikhs. And we were living also in the Muslim dominated area. So we had a very major trouble. So the duty was allotted to everybody at night, supervision, like a chowkidar, somebody has to remain awake. This trouble continued for 3-4 days. Lot of people were killed and number of houses were burnt in Rawalpindi. Then my father immediately took a decision, we should shift to some area which are Hindu dominated area and not the Muslim dominated area. So we got a house in Krishna Nagar where 80-90% were Hindus and about 10% were Muslim. So relatively safe for Hindus, we shifted there. Now this trouble continued and schools remained closed. During the month of May, June, schools were opened again and we went to the school, but then we found that many students were not coming at all. Some parents had already left Rawalpindi for areas in Delhi or some other places. So this movement continued, and but that riots had slowed down because the army was patrolling day and night the streets of Rawalpindi, and so there was a control on burning of houses, etc. But the problem continued.
So, Uncle, when did you leave for, when did you leave for India? Around which month?
Now, what happened was, then then government of Punjab asked my father, rather all Hindus, you want to stay in Pakistan or you would like to move to India side? So my father decided we will move toward India side. That those who are in service, this question was raised to them. Those who were doing private job, they took decision independently. So my father decided, so on 11th August, we left Rawalpindi for Firozpur, where my father was posted, Firozpur. And next day we came to know from the newspaper that the train which came to Firozpur, 100% people were murdered on the way. Hindus and Sikhs, they were murdered in that train. So probably our was the last train where at least we could safely reach Firozpur. And so 12th August onward, all trains, they were murdering either the ladies, they were taking them out, and men, they were killing them. So this continued for some time. Anyhow, we had reached a safer side of India. So that was in 1947, 12th August morning, we were in Firozpur, which was a part of India. So that is the position as up to, if you want something beyond that, I will also tell.
Yes, I will ask in the next few questions. I also want to ask Adarshji now. Adarshji, you also took a train to India, and you have earlier shared with us a very, what to me is a very searing memory of spending the night in fear and a station master giving you shelter. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how your family moved and that night?
Actually, you see, my father was also in the agriculture department. So he got posting in this Hansi at that time. We left Multan on 12th of March. So when we left, I gave my 8th class exam in March. Exam I gave. After that, there were classes or no, I don't remember. We were living in a very remote area. I would say this is a cantonment area. So there were not much violence, but we could see in the city side that houses were being burnt. That we could see. And there was an atmosphere of very fear. Fear everywhere, was scared of all these things. So we left on 12th of August. But by our train stopped on the way, instead of going straight to Hansi, the train stopped at a place, Samarsatta. So we stayed there, and we got in the platform and waited for the next train was supposed to come and take us to Hansi. So we waited for the whole day. In the evening, you see, one train came. We were waiting for the train. The train came, but the whole passengers of that train were killed. So that was only dead bodies came at that station. So we were very much scared, but on the platform, all the Muslim men were roaming about. And we were 4 sisters, young, and my younger brother was there. So my parents were very much worried. So at that time, the station master of that particular station, Samarsatta, he was a Hindu fellow. So he gave us a feel that you stay for the night in my house. So we all, with my mother and we 4 sisters and my younger brother, we all went to the station master's house and we stayed there for the night. Next day, the train came. At what time, I don't remember. By that train, we came to Hansi. So in the way, you were all scared very much. You scared, all the people were scared. The atmosphere was, any time we were being killed, that type of atmosphere was there. So when we went to Hansi, my father was allotted a house. So straight away we went to the house. But there, you see, the atmosphere was also very bad. There was violence everywhere, you see. So we could hear, you see, people were killing people and throwing them in the canal that was next to that our house. There's lots of people, dead bodies were floating in that canal. Dead bodies were there. So For some time we stayed in that area. That was perhaps an outside area. Then we shifted to a city's place. And city along all around our houses are burnt, you see. In one house, you see, we went and saw just, you see, in the kitchen, you see, somebody was maybe were cooking, for cooking, somebody took a gun and put it, thought for a, instead of using a piece of gun, there's a wood. That lady put that gun for cooking purposes, and the gun was full. So it burst, and then the person who was eating food, he got killed. You see that gun, half burnt gun was still lying there. You see, we saw that. The whole atmosphere was very scary, very scary, you see. So this much I remember at that time, that whole, and this atmosphere stayed for maybe 2-3 years, I would say. After
And
that,
how
my
old were
father
you?
got
How
transferred
old
to
were you,
Ambala.
Auntie? How old were you then?
Pardon?
How old were you?
Maybe I had given the exam of 8th class there. No? So maybe 13 years old, I was 13,
No,
I think.
14,
13, 14, that age. So
Okay.
there was no school at that time in Hansi. Schools were up to 8th class. So I had already given the exam of 8th class in Multan. So I was supposed to go to the 9th class, but as there was no school for 9th class, so I stayed home only. I could, naturally the atmosphere was so scary, you can't imagine while you see sitting here, how bad was that atmosphere. So but that atmosphere stayed, for that scary atmosphere stayed maybe for 2-3 years, I would say. The atmosphere. After that, after his stay in Hansi, my father got transferred to Ambala. And in Ambala, I think by that time, the things had settled down a little bit. So I joined a school in 9th class there in Ambala and continued my studies there. So, but
Okay.
one thing I would like to say, in which I remember at that time, you see, this was all this partition and all the violence which was created because of this. It was only a political agenda only. Agenda of politicians. Normal people did not want this, because you see, they were friendly and they had friends also. One incident now I remember, while just talking to you, my mother related to me, my grandfather lived in Jhang city. So he had lands there, you see. So my uncle and my grandfather, they lived there and they had their own land and they worked in the land only. So when partition this was going to come, my father and my uncle, they came to India and they left some gold and silver with some Muslim friend. They had some gold and silver which they left with some Muslim friend. And my mother told me that after some time, that Muslim friend wrote a letter to my grandfather that your gold and silver, he said, your white sheet and yellow case, instead of telling gold and silver, they are lying safely with me. Please, whenever you want, you come and collect them. So they were one thing. Another thing which I noticed, that people were very honest. I had never heard anybody doing any dishonesty. And
So Malvika, you have collected some fabulous stories over the years. So tell us a little bit about what Citizens Archive of India is and why is it important to archive these oral histories?
Well, yeah, we've collected, it's been just over 3 years that we've been doing this. We've collected about 400 hours of stories. We just crossed 400 hours of stories. And it's important I think their stories, Mr. and Mrs. Savlok and Ms. Parthasati, the stories themselves tells you how important it is to collect these individual stories, because so I'm a history student, all right. I also happen to move a lot and I study the same thing. You switch boards, you study the same history over and over, class 8, class 10, class 12, my degree, and not once and every time the partition, let's say, was mentioned in a paragraph. And Reshmi, you and I have had this conversation where
Yes.
the partition was mentioned in this paragraph, and uh, you were told the country was divided and biggest mass migration, and that's all you know about it. You don't relate to it. You don't know how heartbreaking the whole event was until you speak to people, or how people dealt with that event. So the idea here is that the textbooks give you a very political story. We know Gandhi, we know Nehru, but what about the people? What about the followers of Gandhi and Nehru? What about the people who lived through the partition, who actually got on those trains? How on earth did they come here? What was their experience? And if you don't start recording that experience will be lost forever. You know, you need to record that experience while people can tell you about it. So it started with and I think I do see some family on here. But I always, growing up also in a joint family, my great grandfather was a freedom fighter and a Gandhian, so my grandmother always told me his stories. Our founder, I'm not the founder of the Citizens Archive, is a gentleman called Rohan Parekh, and he also realized when his grandmother passed away that his daughter, they were going to have a baby then, and his daughter will never hear those stories from her. That link between generations will be lost. And what happens when that link is lost is that your ability to relate to your own history gets lost. So I can relate to how a Gandhian feels or what they thought because my grandmother, my parents, uncles, aunts started telling me these stories as a child. When I studied, I realized no one ever tells you that this is how it was. So the idea of the Citizens Archive is to build a history of India, but from the eyes of its people. You know, there's plenty of books out there that will tell you what Gandhi did and what Nehru did, and to know that is a wonderful thing. We must. But how do we relate to it? Someone went on to become the prime minister, went to jail, went on to become the prime minister of the country, went on to become the father of the nation. It sounds glorious, and it is. Then they are the reason that these freedom fighters are the reason that we are where we are today. But what happens to the common people? What happens to people like you and me? How did they live through that time? So that's why it's important to collect these stories, because quite frankly we're never taught these stories. And the other thing is, history is taught in a very black and white way. Mrs. Ablok said, she said, our Muslim friends saved our valuables. They don't teach you that in school, right? They tell you Muslims went to Pakistan, Hindus went to India. It wasn't that simple. It really wasn't. Of course, that is majority of the people came like that. But there are still Hindus in Pakistan. There are still Muslims in India. Why is that? What was their experience? And I realized this when I interviewed a Muslim gentleman in India saying, so what was your father's opinion? He was too young, but what was your father's opinion when the country was being partitioned? He said, well, and they saw the killings. They lived in the Mohammad Ali Road area, and he was distraught. He was sobbing. He said, I remember seeing people killed. And but my father always said that, he believed that the country needed to be partitioned, sure, because there seemed to be no other way out then. But have a loyalty. If you believe you are Indian, whether you are Hindu or Muslim, stay in India, be loyal to India. If you believe you need to go, then go and be loyal to your nation. And remember that we were always one people. So, the stories like these, they never come out. They never come out in the textbooks. And I think it's very important to understand that kind of feeling so that we know where we came from and we know how we got here. That's the idea.
First, let us understand that after 47, for about 1 year, all schools and colleges, they were made refugee camps. So basically there was no school, there was no college, because the people who had come from the other side of Pakistan to India, they were accommodated there. And even lunch was provided to them. So school really started, instead of 47 August, they started maybe May 48 or April 48. So in April 48, we were admitted in school, and then after that studies going on and things were improving. And then people started searching their relations and their friends, because when we left, my two brothers were behind in Rawalpindi, my sisters were behind. So we were searching where they have gone. So one had gone to Patna, all the way they transferred there. The other was transferred to Delhi. So we searched one sister in Meerut. So like that, a few months were going on only searching where are our brothers and sisters. And this didn't happen to us, it happened to everybody. But once things are settled down, then I think avenues were opening up. Then we were started feeling that probably it was a good thing. We have suffered all right, but now we have to make effort to improve India. And immediately I found that improvement of India started. And that was a great thing. Pandit Nehru really did a good job. Let us appreciate. Today we may be criticizing, but if he had not been there, we would not have got Bhakra Dam or so many railway lines and all that. So obviously improvement had started. And that improvement gave us courage to study further, get into higher exam.
The first Independence Day, at that time I was 12 years old. You see, we used to sing a lot of Bharatiya songs. We were very, very good at it, you see. And so during the Independence Day, the first Independence Day, all the children of the neighborhood, we got together and we celebrated by singing and then, clapping hands and then dancing. And then we got into a bus. And in the morning, the first Independence Day, yes, the first we heard Nehru speech.
Yes.
Midnight speech.
Tell us
all
about
sitting, all sitting around Murphy radio. The whole of Madras, it was glued to the radio. And then we all enjoyed that. And then in the evening, and then dancing and celebrating and singing a lot of songs, together. Because I don't know whether everybody knows, about Subramanya Bharati, who was a poet. What Rabindranath Tagore is to Bengal, he is to Tamil Nadu. Though he composed in Tamil, but all his songs, Bharata Desham, and he always sings about the composite culture of India, language, and, we have so many unity in diversity. That was his main theme. So, and then in the evening, we sat in the bus, the whole children with an escort, because we always used to have an escort when we all go together, the whole children of that neighborhood children. And we thought, we will go and see all the illumination crowd all over Madras, they were crowd, they were singing mainly Bharati songs, you see, because it was full of a lot of meaning, even now, if there is time, I can just, a few songs, the meaning of those songs I can tell you. And got into the bus, and then the bus could not move from Pudupet, that is the nearest bus station. We got in, all the children, and everywhere crowd, but very orderly crowd, having flags, singing, dancing, and of course, Bharata Mata Ki Jai, they were all shouting. And the bus, we thought we will come back after about 2 hours or 3 hours. We didn't. At night at 12 o'clock we landed because the bus could not move. We had to go everywhere. But in the bargain, we were happy. We saw all the illumination in all the important buildings throughout Madras. That was really great. I always remember that.
Interesting one, since we, that what I thought would be a political story, but turned out to be a rather personal one, was I interviewed Mrs. Asha Sheth. Now she is the daughter of K.D. Malviya and the great grand niece or something of Madan Mohan Malviya. So grew up in this very politically charged Allahabad, right? But she was a child. She remembers not more than the politics, and she does remember. She said, I remember, my father would be in jail and freedom fighters had no money, and the Nehrus funded a lot of them. And my father would come home in disguise. Even we wouldn't recognize him because he was part of the underground movement. He was always on the run from the police. So all that politics is there. But there's also, she remembers eating in the Malviya household, which was, then they had a very strict kind of Brahminical tradition around that. She remembers how they ate, what they didn't eat, the rituals around the food. And then she remembers because her father started fighting for freedom, they moved out of that household, they moved themselves, grew up in quite difficult circumstances. But more than the politics, she also remembers being Lal Bahadur Shastri's neighbor. And she says, I remember the parathas that they used to make us and how good they were. And she says, I used to call her Lalita Chachi. And what amazing parathas she used to make. She said, none of us had any money, but to eat those parathas was such a treat. So, things like that also. And in another example of something that is somewhat related to politics, so it became a lot more personal for people as children, was what I was talking to you about. I know you said mention it, and maybe this is a good time. It's a trend I noticed about people going to the movies, and maybe Mr. and Mrs. Ablok and Ms. Parthasati can relate or have had a similar experience. Well, I've interviewed a few people and I've always seen this trend in the movies. So there was the oldest story that goes the most far back, possibly to the 30s or early 40s, is possibly from a Mrs. Fiza Lokhandwala, who says, in my community, it was not okay to go to the movies for women, and the mullah would not allow it. And one day we were found out and we had to sneak back home, and his followers heard and they stoned they came back in a tanga and they stoned the tanga, and it was such a headache to go to the movies. Skip to the next decade, my own grandmother told me that she was never allowed by her father to go to the movies because the ticket came with a tax. And that tax was paid to the British, and her father didn't want that tax to be paid. So even though her cousins who she lived with were allowed to go, she was never allowed to go. And I asked her, I said, didn't you feel bad? Because I can imagine my parents told me this, we kicked off of us and said, why aren't you allowing us to go? And she said, no, you just, what your parents said went, you didn't question it. It didn't work like that. You assumed that they are right without question, and you just did it, and you didn't feel too bad about it. So that's what things were like. I also remember a gentleman I interviewed who lived in Karachi. He's no more. Who lived in Karachi, and he said, I remember they used to play God Save the King at the beginning of movies. And this seems to be an experience peculiar to those who lived in Karachi at the time. I don't know how many other cities they did this in. So they played, I know in Maharashtra, they still play the national anthem before a movie, and then they played God Save the King. So, so there were lots of interesting things like this. Or Ms. Parthasati talked about Murphy Radio. Now, a very good example of moving away from just the politics of the time is what we get to learn about a lot is are the kinds of technology, the kinds of brands of things. We had a lady describe the first time she shampooed her hair with shampoo, she didn't know what shampoo was, and the first time she used actual shampoo from the market, or the radios people used. And of course we talk through even post-independence, we talk about life till today. So people talk about their first TV and things like that. So for marketing, for business historians, oral history is very important because they learn about how products were marketed. For instance, tea only became popular because the British marketed, and you'd get chai with a free biscuit, and kids would go to eat that biscuit, and that's why chai became so popular. And someone told us this in an interview, and I had a business historian who's a colleague messaged me saying, yes, I've read this in so much marketing literature. It's so nice to hear someone say it.
Well, in 1947, I must have been 7 or 8. And I remember very clearly, just like Mrs. Sablok said, and Vasanti, I think her name was, we all gathered round the Murphy radio listening to Panditji's Tryst with Destiny talk. And after that, we all went out, and just like she said, in Chennai, we were in Mumbai now, and it was the same. The roads were packed with people all celebrating. There were fireworks, there was a lot of music, lot of joy and happiness everywhere.
Okay. So, do you you were in Bombay, and were you aware of, like Vatsala auntie had said, that they were very aware of who the freedom fighters were, what was going on in the country. So, what
Oh,
was your
yes. Oh, yes, we were very aware of the freedom fighters because where we lived in Dadar, Mumbai, in the house above us was Mr. Achyut Patwardhan, who was a freedom fighter. And I still remember that he had to hide in our bathroom when the police came looking for him to arrest him. And I kept saying, why is he in our bathroom? He should be in his own flat. And I was told by my father, just keep quiet. If anybody asks you anything, don't say that you know Achyut Mama, as we used to call him.
okay?
So I was very aware of the freedom movement because my grandfather was also coming and going. He was part of the Constituent Assembly. He was there at those proceedings. So though a small girl, I was very, very aware of all that was happening.
Auntie, your grandfather played a huge role after independence. So, can you tell us your memories with him?
Yes, when I was growing up, he was still in Oxford where he was teaching philosophy at All Souls College. But he would keep coming to India practically every year to meet with the leaders, especially with Nehru, with whom he was very close. And by then, in 1949-50, my father was in government service, so we were in Delhi. And Tata, as we used to call him, would come and stay with us. And all the leaders would come home to meet him, have discussions. So I would see all of them. I was a little girl, but I knew they were all important people who were coming and having discussions and meetings and all that sort of thing.
Okay, that's quite an unusual childhood to have. Did it,
Yes.
did it, what kind of, what was the emotions that your family, which was so much involved in this, went through after independence? How was it? Did you see a lot of celebration? Did you see a lot of nation building conversation, so to speak?
No, I was too young to really understand all that. But I do know that lots of very important, serious meetings were going on. And we continued to live in Delhi from 1950 to 1960. So I was very close to my grandfather. We'd meet him every day, spend lots of hours with him. And I would see all the various people, various dignitaries from other countries who would come visiting after we got independence and after we got our republic in 1950.
Okay, okay, wonderful. And Auntie, what about you yourself? How were, the growing up years for you? Where did you study? And what were the, like simple things that strike us may not have struck your generation, like Malvika was mentioning, things about college, things about, being young in a newly independent India. So what are your memories of that time when you were old?
Memories of the time. By the time I went to school and college, we already had been independent for some years. So things had sort of settled down. But we, being in Delhi, we certainly knew about the trauma of partition. We had lots of friends who had come across and friends who had gone from here to Pakistan, were not very happy there, would have liked to come back, but were not able to. So, I mean, all that was sort of swirling around us, but we were young children growing up, my brother and I, and it was certainly a period of hope, of looking something new for our country without the colonial yoke, that sort of thing.
That is
But
true.
growing up with my grandfather was something really, really very memorable because he was just a grandfather and he would play with us. We would play cricket with him. We would, when various dignitaries came, he would make sure that we would all have a little peek at them, that sort of thing.
Okay, so
And Panditji was a constant visitor. So we would play cricket with him and my grandfather.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful. We wish we had pictures to share with everyone.
Yeah. Well, I do have a picture somewhere, but I mean, not here now, of us playing. cricket, and I was always a wicket keeper because I would have the South Indian dress of a pavada. So no ball could go beyond the wicket keeper. And my grandfather would refuse to get out, though he would never be able to connect bat and ball.